Hello, we are the Voices of Experience, four pals from Toronto, Canada, all of us with quite a few miles traveled already down life's highway. While that may not translate directly into voices of wisdom, we can promise you an entertaining half hour of discussion on a wide range of topics of current interest. So sojourn with us for a while. You'll hear a variety of points of view. You'll be amused, you'll be provoked, you'll be stimulated.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, and welcome everybody. And I'd like to, first of all, say hello from everybody here, which is Sarab Sandhu, Andrew Wood, Al Brown, and of course myself, Mario Kirikitis, who will be moderating this particular session. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that is very, very relevant. It is COVID related, but it is also part of our social fabric, which is sports. Many times people in all society, and you go back to the times of the ancient Greeks and even before that, to the old world, and you see that sports were part of what made a society. And there is no escaping that COVID has affected our society in many ways, but in sports also, it has affected the sports, not only the games, but also the economic side of it. It has brought up certain issues for racism. It has brought up political issues. So today we're going to explore a lot of those aspects. And what I'd like to begin with is this. And over the past 6 months, sports have been basically put onto the back burner. A lot of sports activities, whether that's basketball, baseball, soccer, football, you name it, people can't come to the arenas. There are no ways of being able to participate live in this. So a lot of things have transitioned to a virtual world. But I want to ask and I want to start with Andrew with this question. From an economic standpoint, Andrew, when we look at sports, it is an engine that drives a lot of economic parts of a society. Where do you think, what do you think has been hurt the most from not being able to have sports?
Yeah, from not being able to have sports. Well, it's such a bonding thing for people, isn't it? I'm a sports fan. I'm not going to say I'm a good sports fan because I'm more faithful to the winning teams than to the teams the whole time. But we've lost something important. And the three people I'm looking at here, a year ago, we'd have been meeting in a pub somewhere for the big game. Go Raptors, as long as I can get that in. I mean, they still have a chance. But now, of course, here we are in our own little boxes and the virtual sports that we're seeing on TV that have just picked up. And I'm watching the baseball. I am watching the basketball. It's not the same, of course. Long term, I mean, gosh, it's going to be very interesting as we're seeing where is this going to go. I don't see how they can keep the financial numbers up. I mean, the hundreds of millions of dollars that these guys are making. I don't see how you can do that without fans in the seats.
Mm-hmm. You know, I agree. And I mean, quite honestly, I don't cry for the multi-millionaire baseball players and football players and soccer players. I mean, they've got their nest eggs pretty well taken care of. What I'm kind of really saddened about is the hot dog stand guy that sits outside the arena trying to sell his hot dogs, the restaurants, the bar owners that you mentioned before, the pub people, all that other business that depends on that has been seriously hurt by people staying now at home and watching this. Al Brown, what do you think? Is there a way that things can change, or are there ways that we can change our economy to be able to fit within this time frame of great tribulation, if you wish, with COVID?
Well, I've in terms of the economy, I've heard that some of the purveyors of goodies to the baseball experience have been trying to cope. For example, think of all the peanut farmers that were making bags and making peanuts to be sold in the arenas. I understand that many of them are repurposing their product because they got a lot of them to sell in the stores so that people can purchase them while and consume them while they're watching their games at home. With regards to the other elements of it, I don't think we can get by without getting back to the real thing, the arenas, because there's something about looking at a game on television and seeing a full house, a full stadium in which all the players are going at it. Now, that's more common in Toronto than it is in the American baseball arenas or baseball stadiums, because lots of times I look at those games and during the main season, the seats are largely empty. But there's still something about that. And I look back to the times when I used to go down to Blue Jays games more than a decade ago, and I'd go down there, and on my way, I'd pick up some greasy fries, and a tube steak. On my way into the stadium to watch the game, it was something else. It was just part of the experience. And when I watch the games on television, I like to see the people in the stands because it makes me feel that I'm part of something as well. When there's nobody in the stands and the players are playing, I think something's missing. You don't get the same crowd appeal, which changes the whole ethos or ambiance, shall we say, in the game. Now, I think sports can survive without the stadiums, at least some leagues, because the reason that the players are given such huge salaries is because their games are televised. Incidentally, the CFL, Canadian Football League, has chosen not to play this year because much more of their revenue actually comes from ticket sales than from television rights. So they've decided for this year at least to close down. As for the States, that's a different game because they're very big sports fans down there. I don't know how they're going to take it because maybe baseball isn't very popular or more games, but they don't play as many football games. And whenever you see a stadium down there at a football game, it's just packed with people. What are those people going to do? How is the game going to appeal to them? And what about all those tailgate parties in the parking lots outside? You know, there's so many implications to this besides what the players are making, what the team owners are making, and the finances and that. It's a whole lifestyle change, really. And when you look back at it, for the last 100 years, sports has been a lifestyle. Spectator Sports has been a lifestyle choice for Americans and Canadians. You hear so many stories out of the period from 50 years ago where people would go to baseball games in the afternoon on a sunny day. It's just one of those things where things have changed. Now, some spectator sports like football and that have always been around. Baseball is relatively new, but the idea of having huge crowds watching the games is quite unique to the 20th and the 21st century. How it's going to work in future is anybody's guess. Maybe, as you say, the players will not get as much money because who's going to watch the games? I mean, is it proved that that people will watch all these games? Will the media be willing to pay these huge contracts for television rights? That's really what drives whether these leagues can maintain their position as it is now.
And I agree. It's funny that you're saying this because I was watching a soccer game recently from I think it was from Italy, and one of the things that I saw that was really interesting was, first of all, the fans. Obviously, the stadiums are empty, but now they've got cardboard cutouts put all around the stadium for fans, and not only that, but they're pumping fake sounds into the stadium, where every time there is something happening, like somebody is coming towards the goal, right, and they're trying to do something, all of a sudden you hear the fans, like somebody is actually manipulating the sound system to make it sound and to give the players the encouragement and the audience, I guess, that kind of feel that there are people there. And you see that also in basketball, where we've been watching the Raptors now with virtual screens on the side of the of the court, right? And it's like you're thinking, my goodness, where have we gone? And this is a question that, for Sarah, from a wellness perspective, since you're a wellness guru, from a wellness perspective, Sarah, how do you see the fact that we can't engage in that kind of an environment anymore, affecting us in a social way, in a human way?
Well, the fact that when we are playing games, which we mean is watching spectator sports, it is a one-off incident how it took place. Assuming you can imagine this thing happening, it may not be exactly the same, but you can imagine that. You can also imagine eating a hot dog when we didn't get any. But the fact is, you can do all this when you're meditating. You know, I can imagine anything I want. I see a football game, I can see this. But what is it, in the end, what is the benefit of seeing that? You're exciting your senses. You are actually seeing, oh, this guy nearly scored. You affected, but you were not part of it. You just saw that. So you can do the same thing by meditating. For me, I would say, if you imagine these things, it'd be much better than actually doing it. Now, of course, these guys are actually playing there, so there's economic routine there. They are only exciting the visitors. That's why in the stadiums, you don't have anybody there. You have sounds coming out. I was watching football, as you said, and suddenly there's nobody there, but there's so much of sound. And I said, they are doing that what I could do myself. So, frankly speaking, I could sit for hours and I can watch any football team. It is the same advantage I have as you're actually watching a live. If you're actually playing, that's different. If you're involved in doing that, or you're watching your kid, it's different because they are doing it. But other than that, it is just an exercise in imagination, which happens to be realistic at that time, but it could be anything different. And so I would say this is bad economically, and it's bad for the sport. But this is for the spectators. You really shouldn't miss anything. You can imagine anything you want.
You created this incredible image of me of people sitting in the lotus position down on grass somewhere in a stadium, just sitting there and imagining the soccer game happening all around them. It's like,
you don't have to go to the stadium. You can be at home and do that.
You can do that. That's true too. And all of a sudden, somebody scores, and everybody's hands from the lotus position goes go. So, but you're absolutely right. There are certain things that we do this for, obviously not only psychological reasons, but it does create a wellness in us. The endorphins, the excitement, the fun, that is all part of it. The ability, we're social creatures. Let's face it. That interaction that we have, whether it is with people that we agree with, in the stands, in the corner of the stands, where everybody's sitting there and cheering and bumping, hitting the drums and doing the claps and all that, or even antagonizing the other team fans. Even that has a social interaction that is, if done correctly and done properly, fun, right? But there is obviously a darker side that can happen where we can take things a little too far, where emotions take us to a different realm. And I want to discuss, I want to go into that because we would be remiss if we didn't cover a little bit of a darker perspective, and that is there has been over not only this past year, but several years now, there has been a racial overtone with sports. And it's not that sports has racism, but there has been people that have been activists who have been sports figures, like Colin Kaepernick, for example, from the San Francisco 49ers, who took a knee during a football game during the national anthem to protest police brutality and and to support Black Lives Matter. So he ended up losing his career because of that. Now that was 4 years ago, but now with what's happened with COVID and all the racial overtones that have happened in the police killings that we've seen, it has become now a mainstream issue. So I want to ask you this: where do sports fit in to change our social consciousness, if you wish? Do they have a place? Do they have a role in doing that? I'd like to ask Al Brown that question.
Well, sports figures have for generations trying to involve themselves with the community. You often see stories where sports figures go out to local charities, they show up, sign autographs for kids, go to hospitals, do all this sort of good stuff. So what they're doing now is, to me, only an extension of that, but it is of a more controversial side of it. My personal view is that professional sportsmen should probably stay out of that, because the issues that are involved are often too politicized, particularly the ones right now, which part of the reason that I think there's been so much protest because of the police killings has been because of the pandemic. There's a lot of people that are really on edge, and I don't know about you, but I think people are more tense, they're more reactive, they're just not, they're feeling more stressed out simply because they can't do the things that they've always wanted to do. They can't go and relieve their tensions by sitting in the stands and cheering on their team. Imagine you're up in that sports stadium and people are doing the wave, and you're participating and you're shouting out and you're calling the umpire's blind, the umpire's blind, the umpire's blind, screaming your lungs out in watching the game. That's all stress release, I believe. Anyways, and even though you're not a player, you're out there on the field as if you are. So there's a lot of stress building up, and particularly at the moment, I think the sports professionals need to be careful how they format their protests. Certainly, there's a lot of things that are coming out, glaring problems in our society, which are only now coming up, but it's not just because of these killings. They've been happening for decades, really. It's just that there's more information about them. A lot of these incidents that are happening are being videoed, and what's really inflaming people is when these videos come out and show what's going on. It's just inflaming the situation that shouldn't be. But then, and I think the sports professionals can be ambassadors for improving all on this. Simply protesting things by raising a fist in the sky or taking a knee, yeah, that's great. But what more can they do, say, just in the backgrounds and trying to improve the situation? That, I think, is more important for what they do. Certainly, if they want to show themselves off, great, but do something more than that. Go out there and be ambassadors for peace and reconciliation.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I was going to disagree with something that I heard from Al. He was saying that he didn't think that the sports figures should be engaging in this kind of discussion, and I have the direct opposite point of view. I think that they have a privileged position in society, number one. They're celebrities universally recognized by just about everyone. And also, let's not forget that these most of these people are themselves racialized. They are Black men off the court, and we've seen a number of instances. For example, a very famous one with Masai Ujiri last year. At the moment that the Raptors won their NBA championship, he was shoved and shoved violently more than once by a security guard, a policeman who was keeping him off the court, not because he shouldn't have been there, but because he made a prejudgment as a Black man. And I think the challenge is for them is to make it meaningful, as Al was saying at the end of his talk there. I think they can go farther with it. And I know they are. LeBron James has a tremendous amount of power just in his personality and who he is. And I know for a fact, because I've been reading about it, that there are a number of initiatives that these people are taking on in terms of registering voters, getting the vote out, spreading the message that it's important. So I think there's every opportunity to make it very meaningful.
I think I have to object with regards to what Andrew said about that incident last year. I think it was blown way out of proportion. I don't know why that security guard did what he did, but I think he should have left his brain at home when he went to work or something like this, because the guy, he's the manager of the team. I mean, he's as tall as the players. He deserved to be there. One has to imagine, why would he do something like that just for without really knowing it? I mean, there was no explanation from his part as to why he did it. And I got a feeling that it was just plain stupidity, and things like that shouldn't get blown out of proportion.
Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I want to say with what we are talking in that perspective, actually all sports, spectator sports, are nothing but manifestation of war. In the olden days, we had war, we used to fight with each other. Now, this is like fighting a war without shedding bloodshed. But the emotions are still the same. The people who are actually fighting for the ball have the same emotion when you're fighting for each other. And of course, this carries on, like when Ujiri was stopped, it's the same emotion carrying on. There are two parties, there are polarization of emotions, and then something happens. So this is just the after effects of emotions. But this spectator sport is nothing but is a pseudo war which is taking place without bloodshed. That's what I'm saying.
You know, let me just say something here, because what he brought up was my ancient ancestors, and I'm going to pull out the fact that I'm Greek right now. During the Olympic Games, we used to suspend war. Right? When you had Athens versus Sparta fighting each other, and the time came for the Olympics, they stopped fighting. They went out there in the arenas and they were throwing the discus and they were throwing the javelin and they were racing each other. Okay, they were wearing fig leaves, or so we think they were, but it doesn't matter. They were actually doing and participating. And I kind of wish that humanity could progress to a way that, yeah, if that analogy is how we resolve our conflicts and get our aggression out, what a beautiful way to finish things off, and get that aggression out from each other. But I got to say something what Al was talking about, and Al touched on a trigger that is very important, and that is that sports is a social valve. Right? And many times when we do come to a situation like we have right now with COVID, where we have been cooped in, there is a way that sports allows that pressure to kind of filter out. But with COVID, we didn't have that ability to go and do that. So we do see many times that you need some kind of release to happen so that we don't have the riots and all the stuff that the bad stuff that comes from it. With regard to the shoving, he was credentialed, and he showed his credentials as he was coming in. and he
Right.
was shoved regardless of that.
That's right.
So whether it was emotional fervor from the security guard, whether it was stupidity from him, I don't know. Nobody was inside his head to be able to tell. But the fact that I think that he was black also must have played a role in it. We can't discard that. Yes, Andrew.
Well, first of all, Ujiri is not the manager of the Toronto Raptors. He's their president. He's their CEO. He's on the top of the organization. And there is one reason why he was shoved in the way he was, trying to come onto the court in spite of his credentials. And it's because he's a black man. And that's the reason. And there's no other one.
I don't think so. The whole arena was full of black people or black men as tall as him.
Right.
So,
he didn't have a uniform on. If he had had a uniform on, he would not have been stopped. And no, he was coming
But he had
on
a
the
suit.
court from the stands. And of course, they don't want people coming onto the court from the stands because then it's a mob. But he is not part of a mob. He's the president of the basketball club, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, Sarah, you were going to say
I
something?
was just saying, is it possible that there were a lot of people trying to go through and he was shoving everybody and he also happened to be one of them? That's
Nah.
a possibility also. No?
No.
well, look, there's a
Anyway,
lot of time.
Mario, when these Olympic Games, they were done by only men, right?
They were done by only men, yes.
And they were always naked.
Yes.
And females were not allowed. I mean,
Well, females were allowed as spectators. They weren't playing.
yeah.
So you can derive whatever Zen Buddhist thing you want out of that one.
I think the Greeks that were in these games wanted to be assured that their opponents didn't have any weapons on them.
And quite honestly, that was part of the reasoning behind it, was that that they didn't want to. They were basically there to do it, and the only decoration that they wore after they won was the crown of the olive branch crown that they would be given by a female, by the way, beautifully dressed. So Greeks, unfortunately, we've lost that. When they talk about the golden age of civilization, if you go back to 2,000-3,000 years ago, I think people had it better in many ways from a way of dealing with each other than we do now. And I got to tell you, with social media the way it is, and with sports being broadcast, and with what Al basically said earlier about us being able to see a lot of this information on our cameras, we see a perspective that has been filmed from one individual, and we try to derive we try to infer, I guess, a lot of the circumstances that came up to that shoving from one angle. But yet we have seen that if you look at it from a whole different angle, the whole reality could be extremely different. So I'm wondering, as a final question for you all, because I think we're coming close to the end of our time, let me ask you this. Where do you see sports coming into a year from now? Do you think we're going to be able to get back into the arenas, get back to playing? When do you think realistically we'll be able to enjoy that? Yes, Sarah.
Yeah, before anybody else starts, I want to say, assuming nowadays with when they have these pictures which are automated, they're not actual human beings. Suppose you have all these people playing a game on the screen and you watch it. What is the difference in that game? That nowadays the games are so realistic on actual people playing. Now they're getting actors also to do the role. You don't know the difference. This is a computer generated picture or this is an actual picture. So when that happens, all the personalities are gone. You can create anything you want. It's just like a game. And then you can have whatever game you want. You want a feel-good game, you can, a bad game, you can do anything. And by the way, before, I must tell you, I'm smelling, I made faki today. Faki, a Greek dish, where, and I've got a soup there ready to go. It's vegetable. It's smelling so nice here.
Many of us would get in trouble in high school if we brought faques at school, and a teacher would come out and ask you, "What is this faques?" Well, in the principal's office, that's lentil soup for those of you who don't know what it is. But I love faques, to be honest. It is one of my favorite dishes. Andrew, what about you? Let's talk about the kind of your last thoughts on this topic.
Your question. Were you guys just swearing, by the way? It almost sounded like you were confused with rehearsal.
Isn't that part of sports too?
This is a family-oriented podcast. Well, your question, Mario, to address it, I think it's a question without an answer. Like so many things in the world today, it all depends where COVID-19 goes, and how quickly they find a vaccine. I think it's going to be an interesting question if they do find a vaccine quickly and this passes over, if that's going to be business as usual, the way it always had been, or whether some of these changes that have been forced on us because of the pandemic might take on a permanent character.
And Al Brown, your final thoughts on this?
I think that the major leagues will try and get back to business as usual as quickly as they can. It may not happen next year. I think next year we're going to be still dealing with the virtual games with nobody in the stands. But after that, they're going to want to get back to it as quickly as possible. And who knows, there may be a resurgence of interest just in going, at least temporarily, in going to the stands and seeing the games, because I don't think there's any substitute to going out and watching the players play in person and going down and enjoying the entire experience. The only reason I stopped doing it is because it was inconvenient for me to drive all the way downtown and spend all that money to go see a game. And I can see myself making a choice there, saying, no, let's go for the fun of it. Let's go for the experience. To hell with the money.
And it is a lot of, and that is part of it as well, is having the fun of being there as a spectator, enjoying, as I said earlier, the interactions with others. And from somebody who has played sports at a pretty good level, I can tell you that there is no substitute. And I'm sorry, Sarah, but I would prefer to kick a soccer ball than to imagine kicking a soccer ball and diving for a soccer ball as a former goalie that I was, right to the corners of that net and getting the ball over the net. Even though I have gray hair, I still dream in that way sometimes that I'm still in front of a goal, protecting the goal. But I'd like to close this off. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and for participating in this. And again, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Al Brown. And thank you all for being part of this. And we will be soon back with another topic, and looking forward to engaging with you all from the voices of Exterior.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.